What is up, everybody? We have made it to chapter 12 of Manly P. Hall's How to Understand Your Bible. This is the last chapter. So we'll go ahead and finish this one out right now. And I think, depending on what you're into, I think I'll have something for everybody coming up here. But we're going to get into some of the more esoteric political realm, some writings from that genre, because I think it's very important. It goes hand in hand with all this stuff. And so we're going to be coming up with some readings out of Robert F. Kennedy's new book, The Real Anthony Fauci. Some selections out of there. And then also the notorious and hated Alex Jones, his book, The Great Reset and the War for the World. We're going to be reading some out of that as well. And I just, regardless of your worldview, I mean, that might make some people want to unsubscribe, but if that is your visceral reaction to what I just said about Alex Jones, I just ask, why not stick around and just hear what he's saying? You don't even have to like the messenger to hear a new message and then to go follow up on it, because I'm going to tell you something. About 98% of what that guy said through the years has come true exactly like he said it would. And they took one of his mistakes and demonized him, and it became a real point of contention as far as, how people view the guy. And people viewed him pretty bad before because of just all what the corporate media said about him, because he was exposing their plans for like 25 years at that point. I mean, the guy's been on air 28, 29 years. So anyway, let's not talk too much about that right now. We're going to focus on chapter 12, the Revelation of St. John. I just want to give you guys an outline of what I've got coming up. And also, to do with the esoteric biblical stuff, we are going to start getting into some writings of Franz Hartmann, who was a Rosicrucian, and he was also taught by the same teacher who taught Steiner, I believe. They were all from that same kind of nucleus. A man named Alois Mailander is agreed to have been the one who taught Steiner and initiated Steiner into Rosicrucianism. So anyway, we're going to have... also he influenced Max Heindel, and that's whose readings we're going to be getting into next as far as the Bible esotericism goes. I've got the Western Wisdom Teachings Bible study that we're going to go through, and it's awesome. You're not going to want to miss it. I guarantee you that. It's some of the best esoteric material I've ever read. So we will be getting into that next. Okay, now that I'm done with all the nonsense, let's start reading. Chapter 12, the Revelation of St. John. It was the wish of Martin Luther that the book of Revelation should be omitted from his translation of the Bible. In his opinion, the Apocalypse was of pagan origin and was not a writing of the beloved John. It was filled with hermetic inferences and strange allegories which troubled the soul of the great German reformer. Though not greatly learned in comparative religion, Luther sensed that Gnosticism had pervaded the book. He denied the divine inspiration of the entire work, affirming with Erasmus that the Apocalypse had no legitimate place in the Christian scripture. He raised his voice against tradition, but tradition was stronger, and after his death, the book of Revelation was restored to the Bible and has remained in its accustomed place ever since. The debate concerning the origin of the book of Revelation began in the 2nd century. Even the Gospel according to St. John was involved. Dionysius of Alexandria declared that both books had been written by Cerinthus, a Gnostic who, to add credence to his writings, had appended thereto the name of John. Later, St. Jerome attacked the validity of the Apocalypse, lending to the controversy one of the greatest names in the Church. Jerome insisted that through some machination of the evil one, the devil had introduced his voice into the Scripture itself, in an effort to undo the whole labor of Christendom. It must be acknowledged, then, that the authorship of the Revelation is extremely uncertain. The claims of the authorized version that it was the work of John, while on the Isle of Patmos, may be liberally discounted. It is quite possible that the Cerinthus story is the correct one. If so, the Revelation may be the most important work in the entire New Testament, for the reason that it arose from Gnostic scholarship. From a philosophical standpoint, the book of Revelation exhibits a wisdom far in excess of the other Testament writings. Here, comparative religion is introduced. The great mystery institutions which dignified the past with their initiates find a place in the Apocalypse. The rites of Phrygia, those celebrating the aged one who walks amidst the lamps, the rites of Osiris, wherein is set forth the last judgment, and the rites of the ancient sun god, and the horsemen who ride through the sky. All these and many others are to be found set forth in various sections of the Apocalypse. Recent translations of Egyptian manuscripts indicate that in some cases the pre-Christian text has been quoted word for word. Here indeed is the mystery of pagan books, with only the change of an occasional thought or word wandering into the Christian scriptures, becoming canonical, and remaining century after century unidentified as to their original sources. John was one of the disciples who did not suffer martyrdom. He is believed to have been buried at Ephesus, the city of the mysteries, near the tomb of the Virgin Mary. John sleeps through the centuries, awaiting the return of his Lord. When that great day comes, he will arise and be seated upon the right side of his Master. These legends have little regard for history, but are products of the traditional trend in early Christian thought. During this period, fantastic accounts of Christian origins were developed, and these inventions ultimately took on a stature second only to the scriptures themselves. There was a wild confusion of Christian and pagan doctrine. The Greek god Dionysus was canonized, as was also his Roman mode Bacchus. The pagan mathematician Hypatia, a victim of Christian monks, blossomed forth as Saint Catherine of Alexandria. It was not until the end of the Dark Ages that anything resembling reason could be clearly distinguished in the picture. This was no time of critical scholarship. From our present perspective, it is reasonably certain that the Apocalypse is a compilation of pagan doctrines with an occasional Christian reference interpolated into the text. Revelation 1:9 reads, I, John, who also am your brother and companion in tribulation and in the kingdom and patience of Jesus Christ, was in the isle that is called Patmos, the word of God, and for the testimony of Jesus Christ. During the years when John is supposed to have lived on the island of Patmos, he was far from the boundaries of Christian influence. The people who dwelt in that region were called Priscillianists, the followers of a priestess by the name Priscilla. She was similar to the Roman Sibyls, practicing strange rites and giving oracles. The Priscillianists borrowed from the Gnostics and Manichaeans, and from the wild diffusion of doctrines, conceptions, and sorceries that were practiced at Patmos, Ephesus, and Philadelphia. They observed nocturnal rites in grottos and caverns. They believed in a messianic tradition and preserved their mysteries under what we call the Phrygian rites. The Phrygian mysteries were celebrated not only near Patmos, but at Ephesus and Philadelphia, two of the seats of the early church. The Phrygian arcana were a curious combination of the messianic tradition of Egypt, part of the Dionysian mysteries of the Greeks, together with elements from the Mithraic doctrines of Persia. It was a conglomerate mysticism which grew up and flourished in the most polyglot areas of the Near East, especially at Ephesus, which was called the melting pot of the ancient world. Ephesus has been referred to as the city of sorcerers. Caravans of traders came there from all parts of the then known world to exhibit their wares. A score of strange religious beliefs and rites mingled, mixed, and prospered in the confusion of the community. Devotees worked spells and enchantments, black magic, necromancy, and divination throve in the congenial atmosphere. The concourse abounded in witches and magicians who sold indiscriminately love potions and poison. And over this bustling community brooded the sovereign goddess Diana of the Ephesians. It should not be concluded, however, that Ephesus was without genuine enlightenment in spiritual matters. Here Buddhist thought mingled with Greek, and the religions of the corners of the earth found common meeting ground. The result was a broader and more tolerant learning that would have been natural in a more secluded area. It was because of this cosmopolitan atmosphere that the Apocalypse contains such a wide distribution of ideas. The book could not have been the product of one simple Syrian. It required a broad contact with the beliefs of the time and an acquaintance with many forms and styles of learning. The rites of Phrygia included much of Sabianism or astrology. The initiates worshipped the sidereal bodies and various celestial phenomena. The ancients had conceived the symbol of the ladder leading upward from earth to heaven. This is Jacob's ladder, and the ladder of Mithras. In his Cave of the Nymphs, a fragment of the Wanderings of Ulysses, Homer describes a sacred cavern of Zarathustra. He says that the cave represents this world. There are 2 great arched doorways, and the ceiling is painted to represent the heavens. Of the 2 entrances, one is of the descent of souls, and the other for the return upward of the gods to the celestial state. Revelation 4:1 reads, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was as it were of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will show thee things which must be hereafter." This verse must be interpreted according to the doctrines of the ancient pagans. The door which opened in the heaven was one of the 2 gates of the mundane sphere. John ascended a symbolical ladder composed of the 7 churches, not to be considered literally as religious institutions, but as symbols of the rungs of the ladder of the mysteries. Even Tertullian and Epiphanius acknowledged that there were not 7 churches at the time of St. John. The nature of the ascent into the mystery of divine things is clarified further in the opening words of Revelation 4:2. "And immediately I was in the Spirit." This can only mean an illumination or internal spiritual mystery by which John was raised up through the door in the mundane sphere into communication with that which abode above in the firmament, or which abode above the firmament. Having ascended by a mystical experience, John is made to describe symbolically that which is above the material heavens. He saw a throne, and upon the throne was a great light. Before the throne were 24 elders and 7 lamps. And the throne was surrounded with a great sea of glass like crystal. The interpretation is Gnostic. The throne and he who sat upon it represents the Lord of the mundane states, Yaldabaoth, master of the aeons. About him are the symbols of the hours which make up time. And before this throne are lights, which are his children. For it is said that from the Lord of the aeons came forth the princes of the 7 planets. The sea, like crystal, is the waters which are above the firmament, as described in Genesis 1:7. This superior sea is described by Socrates, who declares that there are creatures which dwell about the shores of the air which are imperceptible to men. This is the Shamayim of the Kabbalah, the sidereal sea that washes the shores of heaven. This also is the proper sea of life, the waters of life, the heavenly humidity, the ocean of generation, from which souls, once immersed in its mysterious essence, fall into the sphere of generation. Let me just interject here. This is, however, not to be viewed as that there's an actual physical dome over the world and that there's thick physical water out in outer space. It's an allegory, and the allegory dates back to the original formation of the earth, when God separated the waters from the waters. What that actually means is that in the Saturn period, there was nothing but dark heat. Dark heat eventually manifested physically in what we call our physical sun. As that physical sun began to come into contact with the cold outer space, condensation began to arise. That condensation flowed back onto the original sun orb, causing steam. Those waters boiled and eventually started gathering particles of matter and began to, over many millions of years, solidify. And the waters remained on the bottom, but the waters above were the steam, which the fiery sun orb creates when it comes into contact with that water. That's the separation of the waters above and the waters below. It's not what your newly enlightened, quote unquote, flat earthers say. If you believe in the flat earth thing, just look into it, please. I understand it's a time of great confusion right now, but we got to get back to what this stuff really actually meant. We'll be getting into some of that in the next Bible study. Okay, so anyway, let's see here. Where are we at? Okay, I'm having trouble finding my spot here. The proper sea of life, the waters of life, the heavenly humidity, the ocean of generation, from which souls, once immersed in its mysterious essence, fall into the sphere of generation. It is described in detail in the divine Pymander of Hermes and in the writings of the Neoplatonists. In every great system of mythology, this superior sea is mentioned. It is this same water which is above the firmament, which is supposed to have descended in the flood of Noah. In the mystery of initiation, this sea becomes a layer of purification, and as such was symbolized in the rites of the tabernacle by a fountain or basin in the courtyard, with its surface inlaid with the mirrors of the women of Israel. The section of the Apocalypse which deals with the 7 lamps in the midst of which walks the Ancient One is pure Sabianism. The 7 golden candlesticks are the 7 planets, and he who walks in the midst of them is the same as the mysterious being who is seated on the throne above the heavens, and the shining figure that rides upon the wheels, and the cherubim in the vision of Ezekiel. He wears a golden girdle, his hair is as white as snow, his eyes are as a flame of fire, his feet are like brass, and his voice as the sound of many waters. In his right hand he holds 7 stars, and from his mouth comes forth a sharp 2-edged sword. Even the wildest imagination cannot construe this figure to be an orthodox part of Christian theology. He wears the attributes of the 7 powers of God, and according to Revelation 1:20, the stars in his hand are the angels of the 7 churches. He is garmented in white, and like the great figure of the Zohar, moves in a splendor perceptible only to the awakened eye of the seer. And what are the 7 churches which are in Asia? They are the 7 races, the 7 continents, the 7 days of creation, the 7 sacraments, and the 7 mysteries. They are the 7 vowels which are spoken by the mouth, the 7 senses of the perfect man, the 7 bodies of the complete man, and the 7 orifices of the body. Now, think of this. They speak of the holy place up on the hill. I can't think of the exact terminology, but the holy place of the 7 churches upon the hill, correct? Well, in occult physiology, that was where your head is. That is where the 7 churches reside, upon the hill, which is your shoulders. So, think of this. Now, how many orifices do you have in your head? 2 eyes, 2 ear holes, 2 nose holes, and a mouth. 7. These are symbolical of that mystery. And there's, as he already mentioned, there's many other interpretations as well, but they're analogs of one another, and they all connect in some way. The mystery of the 7 is the supreme mystery of the one who was, is, and shall be, Yaldabaoth, Lord of the Aeons, creator of all forms in the mundane sphere. Ruling, like Zeus, with a 7-fold scepter of universal law, he is the master of the mysteries, hierophant of the rites of Phrygia, keeper of the 7 keys by which shall be opened the 7 doors of the mysteries. The mystery of the 7 is completed in the story of the 7 seals and the 7 churches. The churches constitute a ladder, the lowest rung of which is the symbolic church of Ephesus. Ephesus was ruled over by Diana, a lunar goddess. Therefore, the order ascends from the moon to Mercury. The church of Smyrna then comes Pergamos, the church of Venus, Thyatira, the sun, Sardis, Mars, Philadelphia, Jupiter, and lastly, Laodicea. Saturn, Laodicea, that is where your crown chakra is. There are other arrangements assigning the churches differently to the planets, but the result in each case is the same. The churches are rungs of the ladder which leads upward from the elements to the stars. Astronomically considered, the vision of John assumes unexpected significance. Ascending through the door in heaven, he beholds the constellational diffusion composed of the 12 northern constellations and the 12 southern constellations. These were called the Associates, or the first army of the redeemed. The northern constellations were called the Northern Brethren, and the southern constellation, the Southern Brethren. Each was crowned to represent the fact that it was a radiant star or star group. The ancients considered the area south of the equator as a great ocean from which the constellation arose. The great monster or Leviathan creeping out of the southern sea was therefore Cetus, the constellation of the whale. This has been related earlier in the story of Jonah. It is interesting to note that the Round Table of King Arthur contained space for 24 knights seated before panels alternately black and white. At the beginning of the present astronomical age, there was a conjunction of the 7 planets in the sign of Aries. This is described in Revelation as the symbol of the Lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns. By eyes must always be understood planets or stars, and by horns the power or ray which emerges. In modern astrology, the sun is exalted in the sign of the Ram. Bacchus is pictured in the ancient mosaics with a lamb in his arms, and in the catacombs of Rome, figures believed to be those of Christ carry the lamb in one hand and hold the shepherd's crook in the other hand. Jesus is referred to as the Good Shepherd. Hermes was the shepherd of souls, master over the little stars of the constellation of the Ram. The sun is essentially dignified in Leo and exalted in Aries. Therefore, it is written, "The lamb and the lion shall lie down together." It is usual to represent the book of Revelation as a scroll from which are suspended 7 seals. These seals represent a mystery, a secret which cannot easily be revealed because it is sealed up in the mysteries. By the seals is also to be understood the 7 keys of the Scriptures, by the possession of which the initiate may behold all mysteries and all truth. What he said there is very important. Scripture, of all the greatest world religions, and they are all part of the same great religion, all the scriptures are sealed with 7 seals, meaning that each portion of scripture has a 7-layered interpretation. And all these layers are analogous to one another because it is the same energy which produces each phenomenon. I've covered this at length in my previous readings, so I'm not going to go too far into it right now. But if you want to go back and listen to the prior readings, it is actually an energy which underlies each color of the rainbow. You can say it in many ways, but each one of those colors is produced by a frequency. And it is that frequency which determines how that particular color presents itself. And these same frequencies underlie form as well. Color is a form. It's just a more ethereal form. We're not used to calling color, especially in the light spectrum, a form, but it is. It's a form produced by sound. And these sounds also produce a physical form as well. You can witness this in cymatic experiments, and I've covered that at greater length in earlier readings, so I won't go into it here. Okay, let's continue. Upon the opening of the first seal, a horseman rode forth upon a white horse, Revelation 6:2. And he that sat on him had a bow, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Here again is the moon and the bow of Diana. When the second seal was opened, a red horse came forth, and he who rode upon the horse was given a great sword to take peace from the earth. The second horse and rider represent the sun. Upon the opening of the third seal, a black horse came forth, and he who sat upon the horse had a balance in his hand. Revelation 6:6. And I heard a voice in the midst of the 4 beasts say, A measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Oil and wine represent soul and spirit, and the barley and wheat, the lower nature of man. The destroyer upon the black horse is Saturn. The 4th seal, when it was opened, gave forth a pale horse, and the name of him that sat upon it was Death, and hell followed with him. The pale horse is Venus, and Venus is Lucifer, the rebel angel whose light was taken from him. The 5th seal is the seal of the martyrs who cried out in a loud voice. Revelation 6:10. How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on this earth? The 5th seal is Mars, the seal of blood. The 6th seal, when it was opened, gave forth a great earthquake. The stars fell from the heavens, the sun became black, and a great and mighty motion moved the heaven and the earth, and the kings of the earth hid themselves. The 6th seal is Jupiter. The 7th seal was called the Great Silence, and out of the great silence, at the sounding of the trumpet of the 7th angel, appeared a mystery called, quote, the woman clothed with the sun, who was bearing a man-child. This 7th seal is Mercury, which contemplates the great vessels of wrath, or completes, The 7th seal is Mercury, which completes the great vessels of wrath. When the seals were opened, the power of them fell upon the earth and upon all natures. Therefore, these modes of energy were represented as 7 vials which poured out their contents upon the world. The story of the woman clothed in the sun, who went forth into the wilderness to give birth to her man-child, is susceptible of a most prophetic interpretation. About the time of the beginning of the Christian era, the temple at Jerusalem was destroyed, and the Alexandrian libraries were burned. Wisdom departed into the desert, where it was cultured and guarded by the Arabs for nearly 1,000 years, and then returned again to Europe by way of Moorish Spain. Astronomically speaking, the woman clothed with the sun is the position of the sun in Virgo, which corresponds with the present Catholic feast of the Assumption of the Virgin, in which she is lifted up in glory with her Son. There's a lot more symbolism that goes along with that. If you look, and this happens on December 25th, or the night of December 24th, by the way. Look into that. I don't want to give you too much, because then it's just like, you tell somebody everything, then they don't really appreciate it for themselves. That's what I find with esoteric materials, is that you really got to go seek it out for yourself. There's no eureka moment like when you discover something for yourself. Someone can tell you, and then you can understand it, but it really just doesn't hit quite the same way. So go look into that. The Last Judgment is derived almost completely from the metaphysics of Egypt. According to the Egyptians, the human being is born with 7 souls, which are, in a way, the potential powers of the 7 planets in man. The souls are manifested through the 7 senses, the 7 vital organs, the 7 bodily systems. Each of the 7 souls has its planetary name. Saturn is the contemplative or rational soul. Jupiter is the reasonable soul. Mars is the impulsive soul. The Sun is the vivative soul. Venus is the amative soul. Mercury is the intellectual soul, and the Moon is the vegetative or generative soul. The 7 souls together are the bodies of a self, which is the ruler of the entire bodily economy. These souls may be lost, one or more of them, by the misuse of qualities which they represent. In the Book of the Dead, Papyrus of Ani, the spirit of the deceased, speaking from the urn of the heart, beseeches Osiris, "Let me not perish with the king that ruleth for a day." This is the personality. In each life we have a personal complex, which is a king ruling for a day. After death, the complex is broken up and the 7 souls return to the 7 planets, unless initiation has bound them together in a spiritual personality. In the great hall of Amenti, in the room of the columns of the twin truths, the beam and balance were set up for the Last Judgment. The 12 assessors, our modern jury is derived from this, were seated to decide the verdict. Thoth, lord of the writing tablet, prepared to set down the findings. Anubis, the jackal-headed, brings in the heart of the departed, whose Ka, or ethereal self, is also present to behold the judgment. Osiris, enthroned, his body filled with eyes, presides over the weighing. The crocodile-headed Set waits to devour the heart of the unworthy, and Cynocephalus, the ape of wisdom, sits on the beam of the balance. The feather of Mat is placed upon the scales, and the soul is weighed. If the deceased is perfect in the negative confession of faith, "I have not committed," etc., it goes forth into the plains of Aru, where the reeds are long, and there is happiness for the day that has no night. If the 7 souls are lifted up, they become a 7-headed creature, but those parts which fail are judged worthy of resurrection, and are cast into darkness. The outer darkness represents the various planes of the universe from which these souls have come. Here each disintegrates into its primal substance, resulting in the picture of the seven hells. But it is not the spirit that goes to these places of punishment, but the cast-off souls, which are slowly destroyed and their essence returned to the planes from which they came. The psychotasia, or weighing of the soul, has been taken bodily from the Egyptian rites, and, with only a few interpolations and changes, has been made the last judgment of Revelation. The dead who rise from their graves at the sound of Gabriel's trumpet is a mystery of initiation. They arise not from the earth, but from their bodies into the spiritual state. The New Jerusalem consummates the mystical drama. Here is the city, Foursquare. Here is the city Foursquare, its gates and walls of jewels adorned as a bride. The New Jerusalem should not be regarded as a city or even as a symbol of a place. The New Jerusalem is the perfected and redeemed measure and proportion of the initiate. He himself is a sanctified and holy place adorned as a bride. It was an early Christian custom for those entering sacred orders to be united by a mystical marriage with Christ. They indeed were the brides of the Lamb. As a whole, the church itself theoretically was a bride ready to be united with truth, to be lifted up into holy communion with the Most High. The New Jerusalem is not lighted by the sun nor the moon, but the Lamb is the light thereof. Its jeweled foundation is the breastplate of the old tabernacle. It is St. Augustine's city of God. According to the Platonists, those who had received the mysteries, that is, according to Christendom, had been taken into the ecclesia, were a race apart. The old pagan dialogues describe the sages who meet their groves far above the abode of men, and here reason together upon the mysteries of the universe. The New Jerusalem, therefore, is the temple of the greater mysteries, the house built without the sound of hammer or the voice of workman, which is eternal in the heavens. It is the city of the sun existing in the paradisical sphere from which men fell as related in the book of Genesis. According to Jacob Boehme, the New Jerusalem is the redeemed Adam, the man lifted up by the mystery of Christ. It is, therefore, a spiritual symbol of a mystical state of being, where those who dwell together, who have received the light. Let me say that again. It is, therefore, a spiritual symbol of a mystical state of being, where those dwell together who have received the light. In the parable of the prodigal son is described a man who went from his father's house and wasted his substance among the fleshpots of Egypt. He then became a keeper of swine, less than the least. But after these sad adventures he returned to his father's house, sadder but wiser, and rejoiced to remain there. In the hymn of the Robe of Glory, a Gnostic fragment, is set forth the story of one who traveled far and forgot the land from which he came. As he wandered among the bazaars and shops of Egypt, he found no happiness or satisfaction, for dimly through his forgetfulness he sensed his participation in some other life long forgotten. In the Grail legends there is a story of Parsifal, the guileless fool, who, having entered the castle of the Grail, there beheld a great mystery which was beyond his understanding. He therefore was sent forth again into the world, and after grievous sufferings he again discovered the castle of the Grail. You know, the place they're describing is this incarnation. We're all initiates. This life, this physical material incarnation, is our initiation. And we have a job to do here. We're here for a reason, and it's not what the bullshit system tells you the reason is. No, you got to cut through all that and get to why we're really here. We're here to understand. We're here to know why we're here. We're here to become one with our Creator and to recognize that. Anyway, all these stories have, let's see, where am I at here? He, therefore, was sent forth again into the world, and after grievous sufferings, he again discovered the castle of the Grail. All these stories have an identical meaning. Like the Odyssey of Homer, they describe the wanderings of the soul in search of its own far distant land. In the Apocalypse is set forth a strange, fantastic pageantry, the story of the mysteries. It seems as though the book had been taken bodily from some learned and ancient rite. It is the only book that has descended to us in which the rituals of the mysteries are openly described. The study of it must completely change the Christian viewpoint. The understanding of it must bring a universal perspective wider far than the corners of Christendom. It is impossible in conclusion. Here, sorry, I didn't say that. Conclusion. Here's the conclusion. It is impossible in a few hundred pages to interpret the mysteries of the Old and New Testaments. All that I can do is to remind every Bible student that there is a mystery. It is not apparent to the mind alone, nor to the reason, but a mystery to be experienced inwardly through realization. Historically, the Bible is of little value. Its literary excellence comes not from the original, but from the repeated re-editing to match the scholarship of the times. Its strength lies in its presentation of the mystery teachings of ancient Israel and early Greece. It is a book of comparative religion and worthless to the individual who perceives Christianity to be a unique revelation. It is read weekly by thousands of churches of Christendom, but remains sealed with its 7 seals until the individual seeker opens it with his own scholarship and understanding. The first step must be a serene tolerance, even better, a sublime realization that the mysteries of God have been given in all time to all peoples according to their capacity to understand. If you would read the Bible intelligently, you must read certain commentaries by which its keys are made to turn in the ancient lock. The following are some of the most important commentaries. The 6 Books of Proclus on the Theology of Plato, translated by Thomas Taylor, London, 1860. The Gnostics and Their Remains by C.W. King, London, 1887. The Pistis Sophia, translated by G.R.S. Mead, Theosophical Publishing Society, London, 1896. The Book of Beginnings by Gerald Massey, London, 1881. The Natural Genesis by Gerald Massey, London, 1883. Egypt, The Light of the World by Gerald Massey, London, 1907. The Gebers of Hebron by Samuel Pales Dunlop, New York, 1898. The Historical Library of Diodorus the Sicilian. Sicilian? Maybe it means Sicilian. I do not. Oh, no, it means Diodorus Siculus. Various translations. The Book of the Dead. Various translations. The Jewish Wars by Josephus. Various translations. The Mishnah. Various translations. The Babylonian Talmud. The Jerusalem Talmud. The Sefer HaZohar. And finally, the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation and the 32 Paths of Wisdom. Translation by William Wynne Westcott, Theosophical Publishing Society, London, 1893. Translation by Knut Sterning, Ryder and Son, London, 1919. The Guide for the Perplexed by Moses Maimonides. translated from the original Arabic text by M. Friedlander, E.P. Dutton and Company, New York, 1919. The Writings of St. Chrysostom and the Writings of Origen. So write those down and get to studying. All good resources. All of these works are available in English. Many can be secured from your own library or borrowed by your library from the Library of Congress for your use. Through the understanding of the origins and developments and the beliefs relevant to Christianity, it is possible to understand, at least in part, the Gnostic mysteries in the New Testament. You will also gain some insight into the changes and interpolations which have been made, and so have crippled the text. It is not merely a desire for scholarship that should impel this research, but rather a desire for understanding and a true insight into the mysteries of Scriptures. And what he said right there could not be more true. That is literally the key. There is a metaphysical rule that until the candidate or initiate steps off on his own foot to do the seeking, it doesn't matter what someone tells them. It is not going to have the same effect. They're not going to get the same understanding. It has to be sought by the person who seeks to understand. And there has to be a drive in the person to seek and want to know, almost like a hunger. Like, you just got to really want to understand, and your heart has to be pure. And if you knock, it will be provided. Guaranteed. Okay, it is not merely a desire for scholarship that should impel this research, but rather a desire for understanding and a true insight into the mysteries of the Scriptures. The Holy Bible is the sacred book of Christendom, the spiritual guide of nearly 800 million people, a work so widely diffused through human society and so intensive a part of the lives of human beings should be read with understanding, with some grasp of the broader meanings and deeper inferences. Superficiality has led to intolerance. Depth of scholarship will bring about an adequate tolerance. I would remind you that other people also have their sacred books, writings, which have guided moral conduct and spiritual aspirations for centuries. These scriptures of non-Christian peoples should receive the same veneration and the same research that is accorded to our more familiar writings. All the Bibles of the world, united together, reveal one spiritual tradition. They all bear witness to an enlightenment which is imperishable and which has been passed on from age to age as a priceless heritage of wisdom. Every person who is a student of the Christian Bible should read the principal non-Christian scriptures, not critically to point out their defects, but with a sincere desire to increase his own knowledge through a wider acquaintance with the inspired writings. In the last 25 years, there has been a considerable breaking down of religious prejudices. The sacred books of other peoples are now available to all who desire to read them. Read first the Quran, its inspiration seated in the Christian revelation. Then the Dhammapada, the great Buddhist scriptures of the law. Then some small section of the Indian writings, such as the Bhagavad Gita. From these, pass to the Chinese. Read the great Confucian classics and Lao Tzu's Tao Te Ching. When you have made this brief survey, ask yourself sincerely if each of these sacred books has not added something to your inspiration or clarified some point of spiritual conduct. In a world torn by materialistic beliefs, these noble and inspired writings give added courage to meet the problems of the day. Examine several editions of the Christian Bible, as, for example, compare the King James Version with the modern Revised Edition and a recent publication, The Bible as Living Literature. Consider the polyglots and get a parallel Greek-English text. You will make many interesting discoveries. you will find that upon the skeleton of the Greek text has been built the beautiful version that we know. You will discover numerous errors and alternative renderings, and slowly recover from the infallibility complex from which so many Orthodox Bible readers seem to suffer. Read the Vulgate, the Septuagint, and get a good dictionary of English-Hebrew terms. These will all prove valuable. They will not destroy your faith in the Bible, but they may injure your faith in some of its translations. You will see the uselessness of picking phrases to pieces and trying to think in terms of jots and tittles. You will be freed to consider the larger issues. The Christian Bible as we know it today is a fragment of the Christian traditions of the 1st and 2nd centuries. This fragment was arbitrarily preserved and the rest destroyed. Politics and policy played a large part in the compilation. Still, with all its faults and with all its misinterpretations, the Christian Bible is the greatest book in English literature. But like most other great books, it must be approached with understanding, gentleness, impersonality, and a sincere desire to find the truth. And that is going to do it for How to Understand Your Bible, a Philosopher's Interpretation of Obscure and Puzzling Passages by Manly P. Hall. Stick around on this channel, and like I said, we're going to be doing some esoteric political readings coming up, and also you definitely do not want to miss the Rosicrucian Bible study that we're about to do from the Rosicrucian Fellowship of Max Heindel, and it is the Western Wisdom Bible teachings. That's going to be excellent. You definitely want to stick around for that. But that's going to do it for now. Everybody, thanks again for listening. We made our way through another book here, and we will start on the others shortly. Thanks again. Share with the people who you think would enjoy this, the people who are really seeking, and don't force it on anyone else. And that's it. Everybody take care. We'll catch you again next time.